Today, again, I want to get into a little bit of depth on e-waste and what happens to a CRT when it's sent to be recycled. Now, in my country, which is the United States, we still have a pretty healthy portion of CRTs in people's homes. According to a 2016 survey, at least 30% of homes in the United States still contain at least one CRT television. And that actually computes out to millions upon millions of CRTs that have not even been taken out of the homes yet and entered into the e-cycling and recycling system. If you want to get rid of your CRT properly, you're going to try to contact an e-waste place or a recycler, and you'll want to talk to those recyclers and they'll tell them that you're trying to get rid of a CRT, either television or monitor, and you're going to be met with a couple reactions. There's some places that flat out won't take it, and they're being honest with you when they say they won't take it because the cost to break down a CRT is way more than the cost of the materials that are salvaged out of it. And you see this circuit board and these other circuit boards and the deflection yoke here and even this plastic to a point. It can technically all be salvaged, melted down, and then reused in another form of industry. And most of it is in that case. However, the glass from the tube is the hardest part to dispose of. It takes specialized equipment and a specialized procedure because there's a lot of lead inside that glass tube, which you probably already know. But this lead and this glass, it cannot be just disposed of any way you want, or you'll be releasing lead into the atmosphere, into groundwater, into the earth, and that'll damage it. So the e-waste or the recycler is supposed to have a specific kiln. Now there's not too many of these places even available in the United States, much less the entire world, that does this properly, where they actually have a kiln that burns up and separates the lead from the glass, and then they take that lead, and they said that they actually sell this lead to battery companies, and then they take the glass and they have a hard time still, even the places that process it properly, they have a hard time still of dealing with the leftover glass that's broken down into glass. They tried to use it in concrete as a mix material, and that's somewhat useful, but there's so much of this glass that they don't know what to do with it. Think about it. Even though you might think, well, yeah, you can recycle glass like drink bottles and jars and things like that that you have your food in, but you're not going to reuse a glass CRT tube that had lead in it at any point. That's never going to be possible to be eaten out of or drank out of safely, at least not with modern technology. So that can never be recycled and turned into a beer bottle or a Coke bottle or anything. So back to the e-waste facility. The e-waste facility has to either send this tube to the nearest facility that can properly dispose of it at an extreme cost to them, or they can repackage it. And that just means rebrand it, as instead of calling the CRT e-waste, they say it is a used good that still can be sold as used product, and they end up shipping it all around the world. I mean, all around the world, mostly to third world countries, and they're sneaking around doing this because it's not legal to send your e-waste like this without permits to countries like these third world countries that are getting bombarded with your e-waste and my e-waste and all of our e-waste, especially if we're in the countries, anything in Europe or Australia or especially America. We're obsessed with technology. We're obsessed with getting the next new gadget, and that leaves all the old gadgets behind us. And we think, oh, these things, they look like they're easy to throw away, but the truth is there's so much heavy metal, so much toxic materials in these items that if they started to burn, that gas can do permanent damage to people, especially children. And that's what happens to this stuff. It ends up in these waste fields in China, Africa, Pakistan, and you have kids that sit around and literally over open fires burn components out of these boards. and try to salvage whatever they can out of CRTs or any kind of e-waste. The problem is the CRT, even those, there's not even anything for them to do with the CRTs in their e-waste fields in those areas. So there's literally walls and mountains and fields and acres of just left and forgotten CRTs all over the world, especially in these third world countries. So what I would recommend first is I'm going to link below to a very impressive video I watched that was a documentary done by 60 Minutes. Alright, so the link's below to this documentary, and the reason this is so highly recommended is there's actually a undercover operation in this 60 Minutes special where they track a load of CRTs that comes out of a small business, and they follow where it ends up and how it gets there and how it's not supposed to be there, and how the way they shuffled this job around where they're switching these titles of CRTs instead of calling them waste materials, where they're picking them up as waste, but then they're repackaging them and selling them to these third world countries as non-waste but used items. It shows them going through that process of how they do it, but how also it's illegal and not to be done, but they still do it. And the problem is there's a lot of areas in these third world countries where people have no other way to make money, and so they're willing to pick between poison and poverty, which is just gut-wrenching when you watch this stuff, the kind of things that people suffer through to make a living, and it really makes you feel sick at kind of the way culture has pushed and big businesses have pushed us into believing that these items are no good anymore, that these items need to be just forgotten so you can go buy yourself a brand new 4K television, and then 2 months from then they're going to come out with 5K and 6K, and it's a never-ending process. So take the time that you need to make sure that you properly dispose of a glass tube if you have to. And again, the rest of this e-waste, you can even break this down yourself and get rid of it if you had to, or try to sell these things for parts. A lot of people are looking for parts. But just continue to work on old electronics, and let's do our part to help change mindsets, make people realize that this is more than just a fun art project or just about video games and watching old movies and cool content, that we're actually trying to make a difference and kind of do what we can to help with the real environmental issues that are impacting our world today and will be impacting our world for the next 30 or 40 years. Again, as these CRTs leave commissions and begin to all hit the remaining salvage and recycling yards. So make sure that if you are going to recycle something, do your research, see where it's going, see if the company actually breaks down the glass. If they don't, ask them what they're going to do with it. And you know, there are companies that are advertising in the United States that do it correctly, and you can actually ship the stuff to them. And they don't charge you as much because they realize, I think they're getting some subsidies. I hope they're getting some subsidies, because if they're not, then they're probably not doing it properly. But they're going to share some of the cost on these things because they have a better procedure down. And hopefully maybe we can come up with a way, and this isn't me personally, but maybe as a society we can come up with a way to limit the amount of items and electronics that we allow to be thrown in front of our faces and purchased by ourselves every year. And just try to use what we've got, learn things on old machines, or we're really going to be suffering again in 40 years when we don't know what to do with CRT tubes still. Alright, so I'm Steve. Thanks for staying with this crazy video today, and keep on repairing things.